What is the most creepiest thing you saw even though you were very skeptical about paranormal things? I was about 10 years old when me and my friend went to say hello to his mum, who was working as a barmaid in one of the local pubs. The pub was built in 1461, so it has a good amount of history. After saying hello to his mum, we went to leave and noticed the cellar door was open. Being curious 10-year-olds and out of earshot of any adults, we decided to sneak down and have a cheeky look around. When we got down there, it was kind of how you would expect, just loads of barrels of booze and storage for other bits and pieces. But suddenly we hear this, "Excuse me," from behind us. We spin around and there is a lady in the cellar. She says to us, "You shouldn't be down here, and we should go back upstairs quickly." We do as we're told, and as we're exiting the cellar, we are caught red-handed by the landlord of the pub, who asks us what we were doing in the cellar. We explain we just wanted to see what was down there, but the lady told us to go back upstairs. He looked a little confused by this and asked, "What lady?" before venturing down into the cellar himself. A few minutes passed, and when he came back he told us there was nobody down there, and to stop messing around, at which point we left the building to go and do other things. The thing I remember is the lady was dressed in an old-timey maid's outfit that you would see in a British Victorian period drama. I also remember she didn't feel threatening or scary, but rather kind and gentle. I messaged my friend about this a few weeks ago, 26 years later, and he remembered it clearly. I have heard several people talk about a maid or servant who was pushed down or fell down the cellar stairs and broke her neck. So in conclusion, it was either the ghost of a Victorian servant or the landlord was doing kinky stuff with someone in the cellar, and we arrived at an inconvenient time. This happened back when we were like in 3rd grade. It was around 7 p.m. right when the sun was almost set. My cousins swore that one of my grandma's friends was in their backyard, knocking on the window in their room and trying to talk to them. Although not entirely strange for her to be back there, she regularly helped my grandma with her garden. At this point she had been reported missing and nobody even knew where she was. It was only later that we learned she was already dead sometime that morning. She had been stabbed several times and her body found in a dumpster nearby. I don't know who the fuck my cousins saw that night. I wouldn't say creepy, more like strange. When I was a kid we had a rocking chair in my room, that was super comfortable. I needed it in my room because I regularly had extremely bad night terrors, and my parents would have to come and calm me down by rocking me to sleep in it. This got to the point where it happened nightly, and my parents clearly got very tired from it, even though they said it was all right. One night, I woke up, presumably from a night terror, and instead of my parents being by my bed, this old woman who I've never seen, who very slightly glowed a soft green, was sitting in the rocking chair, rocking it. She was dressed in the very typical grandmother attire and specifically had a jade bead necklace. She gestured for me to join her, and whilst I was still a kid who literally just woke from a night terror, I wasn't afraid of her at all. I joined her and she rocked the chair and hummed for a while. I am deaf, but I could feel the vibrations of the hum, and eventually I went back into my bed and she would pull the bed covers over me. She kept appearing every night for quite a while, and it was the same routine. Although she would be wearing different clothes, she would always wear the jade necklace. Eventually my night terrors subsided, so I only sometimes saw the woman. Looking back I realize how weird it must have been for my parents, because I was at one point waking him every night because of my night terrors, then suddenly one night I stopped needing him at all. So one night, my parents came in when I was in the middle of walking over to the rocking chair with the old woman. They asked what I was doing. And when I looked back at the rocking chair there was no one there. She appeared a couple times following that, but for the most part my night terrors completely stopped, so she stopped showing up. Fast forward to when I was 18 and my parents were showing me old photos of my family. Then I spotted a photo which had the rocking chair. I was shocked to see that the old woman was in the photograph, on the rocking chair. Turns out the rocking chair was from my grandma's grandma, who was the woman in the photo. But what freaked me out was when I was told she always wore this necklace of jade beads, and would usually be found on the rocking chair, and was reportedly very motherly. While I don't generally believe in the supernatural, I can't deny the fact that there was no way I could have seen her before and imagined her exactly as how she looked, including the details about her jade necklace. My aunt has a story of her and her siblings sharing the same experience while in 3 separate rooms. My aunt and I were driving in the town she went to school in. We drove past a house and I remarked how bad it looked. She replied, "It is worse inside. That place is haunted." I had never heard my aunt talk of anything paranormal and I haven't since. The story goes that the 3 of them rented out some sketchy house while going to school. Apparently, strange things would happen that made them feel uncomfortable but never anything crazy. They would all notice on a few occasions they would wake up in the night with the blankets off and at the foot of the bed. Nothing strange, people kick of blankets when they get too hot all the time. One night, my aunt recounts that she had a dream she was falling and needed to grab onto something to save herself. She suddenly realized that she wasn't dreaming and she was being pulled by her ankles out of her bed. She grabbed the rails of the headboard and after a few horrifying moments she gets the strength to scream. At the same time she hears screams from her siblings' rooms. Just as soon as it started, the feeling ended and she ran to check on them. They all had the same feeling of being pulled out of their bed. Needless to say they moved out and didn't look back. Going to visit grandfather's grave when I was in my mid-20s. My grandfather was buried in a really old graveyard where the oldest graves were in the center like before Civil War times. It was really in the boonies, so it's like middle of nowhere with old church-type graveyard. Anyway, you have to walk the graveyard and my grandfather is buried way in the back, so I hike up and say a few things and enjoy the quiet for a while, then start back down and detour a bit to look at some of the old gravestones. There is this one particular huge gravestone in the exact center, just massive compared to the others, which looks like a giant cut of rock was stood on end and the marking was simply chiseled in. It also is the only grave marking with an old iron fence around the plot, so it is really overgrown in comparison to the well-maintained plots. So I amble over and look at this and try to read it, but the grass is really blocking the dates, so I lean over the fence to brush aside and look for details. And just as I read 1790, something, well, rattles right next to my ear. Immediately, I think rattlesnake and jerk up. And as I do, something pushed me back hard. I actually skidded back about 3 feet and landed on my butt. I kinda freak a bit, looking around, and trying to figure out what the hell happened. I looked down at the base of the grave trying to see if I saw a snake or something and then blinked because something was wrong. I couldn't figure it out at once. Then sorta shuddered and then really looked. And there was something causing the air to blur in front of me when I looked at the grave, but had edges so everything was clear around it. I suddenly broke out in a cold sweat and butt scooted back so fast I hit my tailbone on a gravestone. I jumped up and half ran down the hill to the bridge to the parking lot and stopped right when I got to it to calm a bit. And then, I turned around and looked up, and I saw the air blur moving down the hill between the goddamn stones toward me, and it was vaguely human-shaped. I could literally see the fucking movement as details went blurry and refocused as it moved. It wasn't fast, but it was coming. That did it. I tore ass across the bridge, jumped in my car and burned rubber out of the lot. It's been nearly 20-something years since that time, and even typing this has got me jittery. Just thinking about seeing the world blurred without any reason to it. And it's moving toward you. Christ.